Hey everyone, welcome in, echohack here. Today we're going to take a look at a brand new blog post that just dropped from Blizzard, the Diablo 4 Open Beta Retrospective. Transforming feedback into change. On the weekends of March 17th and 24th, Sanctuary let out a cry for help, a cry that would be answered by hordes of wanderers who rode in on a nameless horse and loosened Lilith's grasp on Sanctuary. During the early access and open beta weekends, these players sent countless demons back to the burning hells, obtained powerful gear, and saw Lilith's grand plot begin to unfold before them. Many of these players also took the time to leave valuable feedback on our official Diablo 4 forums and on platforms such as Reddit and Discord. After the early access and open beta weekends concluded, the development team read through all of your feedback and reviewed gameplay data. Using this information, we have made a variety of fixes and updates to various systems in Diablo 4, all of which will be present in the version of the game that launches on June 6th. None of this would be possible without the community's dedication and love for the Diablo universe, to which we say thank you. So, thank you, Blizzard, for listening to feedback. I know myself and many of the other MAXROLL content creators have submitted pages and pages and pages and pages of feedback. I think my own feedback was somewhere in the realm of 40 pages, as well as like several other 30-minute videos. So thank you for watching and consuming all the feedback. I know it must have been very difficult just getting through it, let alone implementing it. So here we go. Dungeons. Dungeon layouts. One of the most common pieces of feedback we received is that players felt they were doing a lot of backtracking within certain dungeons. We have optimized multiple dungeons across all zones to minimize the need for backtracking. Here's a list of dungeons specifically in the Fractured Peak zone which received layout updates. Caldera Update, Defiled Catacombs, Derelict Lodge, Forbidden City, Hoarfrost Demise, Mortal Elimination, Core Dragon Barracks, Smallwood, and Rhymescar Caverns. Okay. So this is really good. This isn't everything we wanted about dungeon layouts. One of the other pieces of feedback that we gave, one of the things I mentioned in my own feedback that they probably won't fix just because of how much work it is the fact that there's only really a couple of layouts for each dungeon, right? I would say there's maybe 3 for each dungeon. So the replayability of the dungeons is still fairly low, even with this backtracking in place. But this is definitely one of the worst problems about dungeons, and having this gone is super, super awesome. Okay, the developer's note on this. Our primary goal with the layout changes was to reduce certain kinds of backtracking which detract from a player's experience. An example of this change is that players previously needed to enter side rooms to interact with structure objectives, causing them to retread the same path. Now many of our structure objectives have been repositioned along main dungeon pathways, making them easier for players to reach and allowing them to readily explore the dungeon after defeating the structure. This was a big one, and this was something I called out in my own feedback. You know, it felt weird going around and punching 3 structures in the face and just kind of going in the room and then out of the room. It just felt very strange. So the fact that that's gone entirely is super good. That's super good for the game. Dungeon events. The chance for an event to spawn inside of a dungeon has increased from 10% to 60%. A 6 times increase. That's a lot. I wonder if that's too much. Dungeons were already sort of like the best place in the game to get XP. I wonder if they'll regret this change. This is a huge change. 6 times. So like this change makes dungeons maybe even more about events than the world is about events. There's a couple of trade-offs here. I guess the first trade-off is that when you're in a dungeon, you're in an instanced area, right? So like other players can't interact with you in a dungeon, whereas like in the open world they can, right? You can just run across somebody who's interacting with an event in the open world. So in a certain sense, I kind of like dungeons because of that, but I also think that it kind of gives way back to sort of this Diablo 3-esque styled gameplay where you're always doing greater rifts kind of all the time. And I wonder if they'll end up dialing this back just a little bit, because 6 times increase for the event, that seems like a lot. We'll have to see what that feels like. I already felt like there were a lot of events and dungeons, so I wonder if they'll end up dialing this back. Anyway, let's move on. Dungeon gameplay. To reduce the need to backtrack small numbers of straggling monsters, will seek out the player to help complete the kill all monster objective. Okay, so this is how they're going to try to fix the kill all monster objective. The problem with this objective is that, again, it's sort of backtracking, right? Like you have to go all the way back to maybe the beginning of the dungeon or an arm of the dungeon to find, you know, the last 5-10 monsters, and it's pretty obnoxious. The way this reads, I'm not sure what this exactly means. Small numbers of straggling monsters. What is a straggling monster? Like, I don't understand what this is actually saying. And this is like the dev interpretation, right? Is this saying that the monsters in the dungeon will start aggroing on you from like across the dungeon and they'll run to you from across the dungeon? Because if so, then it still might take them a while to get to you, right? That might still be annoying. But if what this means is we're gonna spawn in new monsters right on top of you to help you finish the objective right away, then maybe that's a lot less annoying. Maybe that's okay, right? So I'm not sure exactly what this means, but either way, this is a huge improvement. This is a massive improvement to the game. This is very healthy for the game. When Animus is gathered, the player and the nearby allies will gain 10 resource, reduce all active cooldowns by 1 second. When Animus is gathered, I'm not sure the need for this change. I mean, I don't think this is a bad thing because you can't just like gather infinite Animus, but I don't really understand why this would be an important change. I guess maybe there are certain very difficult monsters. The Animus carriers are actually very, very difficult elites. They're like super elites almost. And so maybe they want to sort of balance the difficulty of killing a super elite by, you know, giving you something back after you kill them so that you can sort of speed on to the next objective. Maybe that's the idea here. I'm not sure what this change actually does. Depositing Animus channel time was reduced from 3 to 0 seconds. I'm okay with this. Okay, so like the whole idea of a channel, right, is that you're trying to complete an objective without interacting with the monsters, right? So if you've already interacted with the monsters, then you should probably not have to channel, if you get what I'm saying, right? So like in the case of Animus carriers, then you've already killed the Animus carrier. So why are you channeling again? It's just kind of slowing you down through the dungeon. So this is a good change. I like this change. I wonder if 3 to 0 seconds. 0 is a very different number than like say 0.5. 0 is an interesting choice here. So I'm curious what made them go all the way to 0, which basically eliminates the channeling time entirely. So I'm curious what that does. We'll have to see what 0 seconds channeling, what that means, because 0 seconds channeling might mean something different than, you know, 0.5 seconds channeling. That's interesting. We'll have to see. Okay, the time to rescue was reduced from 3 to 1.5 seconds. Okay, this is talking about the prisoners, right? So like you'll have this prisoner objective that says, hey, you have 7 prisoners in a dungeon, and then you have to sit there and channel on them. And so if you have to sit there and channel 7 times in a dungeon, and then you're repeating that dungeon over and over and over again, that's every time you do that dungeon, you're spending 21 seconds just sitting down, assuming you don't get, you know, interrupted during your channel. You're just sitting down for 21 seconds doing nothing. And so that's pretty obnoxious. So I like this change. I'm also glad that this is not 0 seconds, because if this was 0 seconds, then that would mean that you could sort of like skip all of the enemies, and you would just like speed run to all of the rescues to just finish the dungeon. And that would also be kind of bad. So I wonder if they might up this again to maybe like 2 seconds, or they might tune this a little bit. If they do, that's probably okay. This is a 50% reduction. This is huge. This is a huge change. All of these are huge changes, by the way. Every single bullet point in here, this is a huge change. All rescue objectives now drop a health potion after completion. Okay, I don't think I really needed it, but I don't see this being a bad thing. While carrying the ancient statue, bloodstone, mechanical box, or stone carving, you will receive a momentum bonus, granting 25% move speed increase to you and nearby allies. I think this is designed to sort of tackle the problem of, well, I had to backtrack to get the statue, and now I have to go all the way back to like some room to drop the statue off before I then go get another statue or something like that. So essentially, while you have the statue, they don't want you to spend a lot of time, you know, traveling to drop it off again. That's a good change. I wonder if this will end up being abused because it just grants you a movement speed bonus. So we'll have to think about that one some more, but I wonder if there's a better way to solve this problem of, you know, this feels like a Band-Aid, a little bit of a Band-Aid to me, because like go grab the thing and then go put it on the pedestal. I still don't think that's a great objective. And so this feels Band-Aid-y like to me, in order to fix this. So hopefully this momentum bonus move speed increase doesn't end up being abused somehow. All right, pedestals had their channeling time reduced from 2 to 0 seconds. Same comment about animus carriers, right? You've already gotten the thing. You already channeled to pick the item up, right? The statue or the box, the stone carving. You already picked it up. You already interacted with the enemies to do that. So dropping it off shouldn't be another interaction, right? So that's a good change. Returning a portable object to its pedestal now fully restores health, resource potions, and resets cooldowns for all nearby players. Wow. I don't understand this change. This is a weird change. Why? I mean, I guess this gives you like some strategic advantage for returning something to a pedestal, but yeah, I'm not sure I understand what this one is trying to accomplish. There was never a problem where when you put a object back on the pedestal that you needed to restore your life or health. There's no other objective that really does this in the game, I guess. Like this feels weird to me. Yeah, I'm not sure about this one. Okay. All doors will now generate a minimap ping when they're opened. Again, I don't see what problem this is trying to solve. Maybe this is like a usability thing where I don't know. I hope this doesn't get annoying. I hope the ping isn't like annoying, because opening a door in a Diablo games, and we've joked so many times in the past that opening a door is the final boss of Diablo 3, like the Corvus doors in Diablo 3. If this is obnoxious, then this will be really bad. So the implementation of this minimap ping here needs to be really sort of subtle and gentle and kind, and it doesn't need, if it's like a bing like that, no. Oh my god, that's gonna be bad for the game. So I hope the implementation here is good, and if it is, then I hope it isn't just noise, because I didn't really see a problem here with having a door opening ping. That's strange to me. All structure objectives in dungeons now have additional combat mechanics that players must overcome. This is great. This is directly from our feedback, actually, in that going around and fighting these structure objectives, you would just run into the room, you would punch the statue like twice, and then you would run out of the room. It felt really, really weird. So having a enemy or a spawn of enemies or an elite or something that you have to kill, that you're required to kill in order for the structure to die, I think is a good thing. All right, developer's note. While our dungeons offer a variety of objectives to complete, player feedback stated that the action of completing each of these objectives felt tedious. Yes, and I'm not sure that this solves all of the problems with the objectives. We hope that providing bonuses, such as the increase of mobility while carrying certain objective items, will streamline and vary the experience of completing objectives. This adjustment is merely a starting point, and we intend to extend this philosophy to keys in a future update. Okay. That's really good news, because the variety of the objectives is also a big problem, right? Like if there's 120 dungeons in the game and I'm doing the same 10 objectives in all 120 dungeons, I mean, do you really have 120 dungeons, right? I would argue that maybe not, right? So okay, that's good that this is a starting point, and that they're going to do a lot more here. So this is great. I think what they did is they probably had a big list of problems with objectives, and they prioritized that list, and they said the kill all monster objective is the worst one. How do we fix it, right? And they talked about like rescue time, and they talked about the pedestals and the animus being annoying to channel and all this kind of stuff, right? So it feels like they tried to prioritize the big list of probably 300 objective problems that they have in the game, and they got, they were able to get 10 in. And I mentioned this, by the way, in my big old feedback video here on the channel, is that this is hard, right? The game development is hard, and doing all of the things that they need to do to ship this game with a variety of objectives and 120 dungeons that all have unique feels and layouts and all that kind of stuff. Literally an impossible task. So the fact that they've tackled, what is this, like 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'm sure, and never trust patch notes, I'm sure there's actually more that's not listed here, right? So they've tackled 10 plus however many, right? So that's a great start, and I'm really glad they're going to keep doing that in future updates. That's great. That's great. General for classes. Ooh, juicy time. Okay. All right, get out your class bingo boards, everyone. Let's see if they... Okay, wait. We want to see Druid buffs. We want to see Barbarian survivability for in early game, especially. We want to see Sorceress nerfs to Hydra and Chain Lightning. We want to see Corpse Explosion damage nerf. We want to see potentially a nerf to Bone Spirit. We want to see what else? Oh, Rogue infinite attack speed and a couple of other rogue nerfs. Okay, let's see what we got. Effects like stun and freeze can be applied to elite monsters twice as long before they become unstoppable. Oh, okay. So I guess I hadn't dived into this particular mechanic. So in Diablo 3, there's a mechanic where you can apply what's known as soft crowd control or soft control impairment effects and hard control impairment effects. And if you apply enough hard control impairment effects, then eventually that elite becomes immune to the hard control impairment effect. And there's also sort of like diminishing returns and all that kind of thing. So I think that's kind of what's happening here, is that they basically tuned that threshold of when the immunity or unstoppable for the elite happens. So they tune that threshold up. I think that's a good change. I like that change. Reviewed class skills to confirm that all classes have access to sufficient skills that remove control impairing effects. Reviewed. So, okay, this is kind of weird. This is reading these blog posts, sometimes you don't understand what they're saying. This tells me that they looked at all the class skills to make sure that everybody can remove CC, right? And they said, yes, everyone can remove CC, and they made no changes. That's how I read this. I wonder what this actually means, because this might mean something else. This might mean that they actually changed or tweaked like certain unstoppable mechanics here and there. And to be fair, we played back during the press preview back in December, which had a lot in common with the beta that everybody got to play in March. And there were huge updates from December to March. And one of those updates was a lot of the classes did get unstoppable and other control impairment removing abilities added back into the class from the press preview to the beta, right? So this might just be saying that hey, the beta was good, y'all. Like we checked it. Many legendary powers have had updates to their effectiveness. Okay, so again, what does updates mean? Does this mean nerfs? Does this mean buffs? Does this mean both? I would say maybe this means both nerfs and buffs. Also, okay, this is a personal pet peeve of mine. For a while, back in like a couple of years ago, all the way back to like legendary powers from BlizzCon, they were called legendary powers, right? Now they're called aspects. right? They're called aspects in the game. They're not called powers really anywhere. And so this is sort of like the old way of thinking about legendaries, and now they're called aspects. So I think this is just like a Blizzard employee that's had their face this close to Diablo 4 for 5 years, and it's hard to break old habits. So I think this is I've had to break this habit. I know, in creating content for you guys, is I'll be sitting and writing something about legendary powers or legendary. I even just did it. Legendary aspects for MAXROLL, right? And I'll have to go back and delete it and that sort of thing. And I catch other people doing it all the time too. So just a little pet peeve there. It's called an aspect. It's not a power. All right, let's get into the juice. Barbarian, a flat 10% passive damage reduction has been added for the Barbarian class. Okay. So we were having a huge debate about this internally at MAXROLL, is if there was actually already, because Diablo 3 has this, right, where there's just a flat damage reduction for all melee classes, and ranged classes don't get that flat damage reduction. Just the fact that you made a melee class, you get the damage reduction, right? So we were wondering if that was already in the game. And the problem with Diablo 4 is that there's variable damage. So damage has wide variance on it, except for dots. That's a little bit different. But so it's really hard to test certain things like this in the game itself. So this confirms that no, not all melee classes have that melee passive damage reduction, and B, now Barbarian has one. So that's a great line. That tells us some good mechanic information. Some skill tree passives had their damage reduction effects reduced to compensate. I mean, I'll take that all day. I think what's it called? Challenging Shout is super OP, and probably needs a nerf beyond just this, but they say skill tree passives, so they must be talking about the either the berserking damage reduction node or the damage reduction node on the weapon mastery skill cluster. They must be talking about those two. All right, Whirlwind skill now deals more damage and consumes more fury. Okay, yeah, that's a good change. I think Whirlwind was a little bit weak in the beta, and yeah, just solid. I wonder what more damage means. The exact number there would be nice, and what more fury means. So is this double damage and double fury, or what did they go in and they doubled it? What is the exact details there? I think would tell us a little bit more about what's going on there. The double swing enhancement refunds its full fury cost when used on stunned or knocked down enemies. What was this before? Hold on, let me look this up. What was this before? Because I can't recall exactly what this is. Hold on, let me pull up double swing, you guys. I've got the skill card. All right, that's nice. Yeah, that's nice. Companions. Oh, let's go on to Druid. So we got Druid here. Hoping for big buffs. Companion skills will now deal heavily increased damage. Hell yes. So they want the Druid to be more companion oriented. Love that. That's great. All ultimate skills have their cooldowns reduced. Very good. Very, very good. Usability improvements have been made to maul and pulverize. Wow. So I'm working on my Druid class guide right now. By the way, I just put out the Necromancer class guide on the channel. Go check that out if you haven't. And maul and pulverize scale harder than most skills in the game, and they might be some of the best skills that you can get in the game, just in general, just because of the way they scale and the legendary aspects that exist for them and all that kind of stuff. So if they're now better, if they have better attack animations and they're easier to cast and that sort of thing, this is a good change. That's a really good change. Using a non-shape-shifting skill will transform a druid back into their human form. Oh, that's okay. That's really interesting. Okay, so there's a lot of abilities and aspects and other things in the game that will say something like, when a druid transforms into their werewolf, werebear, whatever form, do X, right? And one of the problems that we were having, sort of theory crafting, is that you can't force transform back into a human. So triggering that aspect is basically impossible, or it's just happenstance, which makes the build trash, right? So now what you can do is you can just put any old regular non-shape shifting skill on your bar. Like let's say you take a Wind Shear, which is a basic, right? You just spend your 2 points on Wind Shear to get to the core skill tree cluster, and you just have that available. And then all of your other skills are, let's say, Werebear, right? Because Werebear is awesome. And then you start equipping aspects that have, when you shift into a Werebear, you get insert awesome stuff here, right? Now you can just cast Wind Shear, transform into a human, and then immediately transform back. And you can just sort of like juggle the transformation to trigger that aspect over and over and over again. That's really good. That's really good. These are huge buffs for Druid. I'm really excited for Druid players. All right, we should see a few nerfs for Necromancer. Let's see what we got. Summoned minions will die more often, requiring players to utilize corpses more often. Okay, yeah, this is really good. During the beta, my summoned minions basically never died. So this is, you know, from a high level play perspective, very, very good, because you want to keep your summoned minions up. And even from sort of like a casual perspective, it sort of gives you this idea that, hey, you do have to control your minions. You have to, you have to manage them. You can't just set them and forget them. So that's really, really good. That's a really good change. Many bonuses in the Book of the Dead have had their stats increased. Yes. Okay. I mean, this is just a straight up buff. I mean, I know I said that we wanted to nerf the Necromancer, but the most boring part of the Necromancer is actually the Book of the Dead, which is its unique class mechanic. You would just go into the Book of the Dead and it would be like, well, hey, here's 15 essence. What? Like, it was pretty bad. So having these bonuses feel more impactful, I think is pretty. That's a pretty huge change. That's gonna make Necro a little. That's gonna make not necessarily Necro OP, but it's gonna make their unique class mechanic feel more impactful to the choices that you make. All right, let's move on. The damage dealt by Corpse Explosion skill has been reduced. Okay, good change. The brightness of skill, well, good change, but how much? Did they have it? Because I don't know. We'll see. The brightness of skeletal warriors and mages has been reduced. Very good change. Yeah. I noticed this between the press preview and the beta that the minions, the skeletal minions of the Necromancer, they got this like really bright blue, shiny sort of coat to them. And it was pretty obnoxious, especially if you had like 5 Necromancers all in the same area or something like that. It was pretty obnoxious. So I'm glad that they sort of like got rid of this now. It sort of added this cartoonish kind of vibe to the skeletal warriors and mages. And so getting rid of that is really nice. I'm a big fan of that change, just from a gameplay feel perspective. All right, let's look up Rogue. Upgrades for subterfuge skills have had their bonuses increased. Okay, yeah, that's a good change. I felt like some of the subterfuge skills were a little bit underpowered. So again, what does increased mean? We'll have to see if they doubled it or if they 1/2 or whatever. Multiple passive skills have had their bonuses increased. I felt like the rogue passives were pretty decent, so I'm not sure. It depends which passive skills they're talking about here. So I'm not sure. They actually removed some passive skills out of the rogue tree entirely from press preview to beta. Rogue used to have these passives that, like, if you had an imbuement just on your skill bar and you cast a skill, it might sometimes just automatically add the imbuement to the skill. That one's like super OP, so obviously they had to remove that, right? So I think maybe what happened here is that when they were going from press preview to beta, and they took the scissors and cut some of the OP stuff off of the classes, they maybe cut a little bit too much of the passives off of rogues. So maybe this is a good change. We'll have to see exactly what they changed. I do have like 40 spreadsheets that is tracking every single change in beta and press preview, so we'll be able to understand what these changes are when they get released at launch. All right, all imbuement skills have had their cooldowns increased. That's a good change. I felt like imbuements were a little bit too impactful. Like it felt like your rogue was pretty strong. It was pretty strong. Got stronger. You got you got further and further down the skill tree, and then you got to imbuements, and then your rogue just went to the moon. Right? It was a little bit too impactful for the class. So having cooldowns increased here is really good. The other reason this is really good is because it gives like this design space for them to add things that reduce the cooldowns of imbuement skills, so that later on you can feel more powerful, if that makes sense, right? So it gives them a little bit of design space for legendary aspects and other passives and that sort of thing. Uniques. We haven't even gotten to any of the uniques in the game, right? Like the beta only went up to level 25. All right, let's jump into Sorcerer. Charged bolts damage was increased and the mana cost to cast has been decreased. I like this change. I actually liked Charge Bolt as a skill a lot in the beta, and there's a pretty good aspect for it. I can't remember exactly what it was off the top of my head. I think it made the Charge Bolts like homing on enemies. I could be wrong about that. I might be misremembering, but it was a nice skill, but it just didn't feel like it hit hard enough. So yeah, this will be good, and I'll love, again, the specifics here kind of matter. Like what is the new mana cost, right? This is going to be great. You guys are going to love my class guides, because in all of the class guides that are coming up, we're going to be able to compare the changes even from press preview to beta to launch and beyond. So all of these like sort of like, well, they increased the damage. What does that mean, right? We'll actually know the very specifics of what that actually means, and we'll be able to analyze it in more detail. So I'm actually really excited about that. All right, decreased the damage of chain lightning and reduced its effectiveness against bosses. This is a huge nerf. All right, so yeah, this definitely needed a nerf, and I think that's a good change for the game. I think that's healthy for the game. Again, the specifics, what does decreased mean, matter here, but that's a good change. Decreased the cooldown for Incinerate's skill enchantment bonus. Okay, so if you didn't know, Incinerate had a skill enchantment bonus. This is the enchantment slot, right? The unique class mechanic for your Sorcerer, where you would pop Incinerate in, and every, 20 seconds? Every 20 seconds, you would get like a little fire-breathing lizard that would basically cast Incinerate. It would breathe fire on enemies for 6 seconds, if I remember correctly, all off the top of my head here. So decreasing that cooldown from 20 seconds to, say, 12, 14 seconds might be a good change, I think. Also, if you ever saw this happen, if you ever saw the little fire lizard happen, it would spawn on little destructible objects and other things like that. So hopefully they fixed that too, because you would be fighting like a whole group of mobs over here, and then way off screen, the little fire lizard would spawn and attack like some crates or something. It was stupid. All right. Firewalls will now spawn underneath enemies more frequently when using its enchantment bonus. This is huge. Okay, so there's like a theoretical firewall build, and we tried it out in beta, and unfortunately it didn't quite work. It did work though in press preview, and in press preview it was good, man. It was great, because you get a movement speed bonus too when those firewalls are on enemies, and you also get burning, and then burning sort of like merges with all of your other really good aspects for Sorcerer. So what more frequently means here is sort of important, but oh man, that's juicy. All right, increase the lucky hit chance for Meteor's skill enchantment bonus. Oh, I know Dreadsight's gonna be happy about this one. So the lucky hit here for Meteor's skill back in press preview was actually one of our best Sorcerer builds. It was like in the Sorcerer build that we had, where you would drop Meteor into the enchantment slot, and then basically you get free meteors, which is super awesome. You didn't even have to have Meteor like on your skill bar, so you could actually have like almost kind of like a 7th ability in a way. So you'd get these free meteors that would come down when you did burning damage, and they like dramatically reduced its ability to drop those free meteors. And so increasing the lucky hit chance here is, it's so good. Okay, yeah, I like these tunings, these changes. This feels more like they sort of changed the class from press preview to beta, and they really liked it in press preview. And they wanted to sort of get back to that a little bit. So this feels like they sort of like tuned the class sort of back to how it was in press preview to me. That's how it feels. Developers note, whenever we introduce changes to our classes, it is with the goal of making them and their skills feel impactful and powerful. Your feedback has helped us uphold this ideal. Some players have adeptly noticed that certain skills were too powerful. One of our goals for skills is to have them be interesting to wield and interactive in terms of itemization and combat feel. We've made some changes to help in this regard, with one example being the Necromancer's minions. We've made a change that makes them more vulnerable in combat, which will make Raising the Dead a more active component of Necromancer's gameplay. Launch is just the first step of our class balance journey, and you can expect further updates that iterate on this pillar of Diablo 4. That's a really good sentence right there. In other words, they're not done yet. Oh, there's one other thing I want to mention, because one other thing I wanted to mention real quick, I did mention this in my Necromancer class guide, but I got a lot of negative comments about it, is that I don't think, just based on the aspects that are in the game, the abilities that are on the Necromancer tree, and so on, that a minion-oriented build, in other words, where minions are the way you do damage as the primary component of your build, I don't think that that's going to be super viable at super endgame, right? You'll probably be able to get to endgame. You might even be able to play a little bit at endgame with a minion-oriented build. But if you want to push really high difficulty content, I don't think minions are going to be able to do it. And this right here, where summoned minions die more often, that cements that. To me, it's in stone right now, where minion-oriented builds at endgame probably have even less of a chance now. So those of you who are looking forward to sort of like a super endgame minion build, I got bad news for you. I don't think it's going to happen. I especially don't think it's going to happen now. I actually think it's a good thing, and I go over that more in my Necromancer guide. All right, let's jump to UI. Fixed an issue where the built-in screen reader was not reading key prompts, game options, details, and other UI text. Great. Fixed an issue where actions could not be bound to the mouse wheel. Super great. Fixed an issue where evade couldn't be bound to right analog stick on controller. Very, very good. Chat will now display on the left side of the screen when using centered action bar configuration. Okay, centered action bar configuration means that you're playing on PC. That's what it means for most people. You might be able to do this on console. I'm not sure. But definitely on PC, the default is to play with centered action bar configuration. That's what that means. And the chat being on the right side, it was on the right side. Let me tell you why this is super annoying. First of all, every single game that is an MMO, that is a MOBA, that is, I don't know, CSGO, like they all put the chat on the left bottom corner where my camera is, like right now, right? This is where streamers a lot of times will put their camera so that they can cover up the chat, right? So that, you know, people can't whisper them with like bad comments, and then that shows on the stream, all that kind of stuff, right? So the other big thing is that in Diablo games, your inventory is on the right side of the screen, right? So since your inventory is on the right side of the screen, if you hover over an item, your camera will block the item description because you're trying to cover the chat with your camera, like as a streamer, right? You also can't see the chat and see your inventory at the same time. That's literally impossible. So this is actually a huge quality of life improvement for anybody playing on PC. A character's stats will be displayed by default when players click the materials and stats button within their inventory. That's great. The move and interact inputs can now be mapped to one button, while primary attack input is mapped to a secondary button. This isn't for me, but I know a lot of people requested this, and this is a great change. The sans serif font used in-game has been replaced with a new serif font. I know a lot of people on Reddit were complaining about this. Me personally, I like being able to read the item descriptions with sans serif font. I hope the serif font that they decide to use for the item descriptions is readable. I don't think the current serif font that they use for like titles of things, which is Exoset, by the way. I don't think Exoset is like a great choice, so hopefully they don't use Exoset. But hopefully it's, something still readable and something with, kind of like a high level of usability. This is minorly annoying for me personally because now I have to go back and do all my skill cards over again. But actually, that's a very small change, and I can do that as soon as we discover what the new serif font here is. So again, like a lot of these other details up here, the details here of this change kind of matter, right? Like which serif font is an important detail. We'll figure that out, I guess, later. Encounters fixed multiple issues that allowed bosses like the Butcher to become unresponsive. Okay, that's great. I had the Butcher despawn on me entirely while I was like fighting him. It was with a Sorcerer. Like I was gonna kill him. I was destroying him, and he just like disappeared on me. So I think this might be one of those issues that they fixed. The Butcher has been reevaluated for difficulty and will present a greater challenge in World Tier 3 and 4. Reevaluated for difficulty. Does this mean that they made him easier in World Tier 1 and 2? Because I don't like that. So I hope I hope this is like not really for people who played the beta, right? I hope that the difficulty for World Tier 1 and 2 is either the same or maybe slightly harder, and that the World Tiers 3 and 4 are even harder. I really liked the Butcher showing up and being very, very difficult. I'm a big fan of that. All right, bosses such as Tchort, Malnok, Venard, and others were reevaluated for melee character difficulty, resulting in changes to attacks and fight mechanics. This is huge. So bosses in Diablo 4 sort of were very difficult for melee characters in general, especially Barbarian and especially Druid, because you would run in to do your damage and then all of their attacks would destroy you. Especially is Venard the werewolf? Venard, whoever the werewolf is, I can't remember which one the werewolf is. I guarantee you one of these is the werewolf boss, because god damn, he would annihilate you if you were a melee character. You would just die, man. So hopefully they tuned that back a little bit and made it a little bit easier for melee to stand toe-to-toe with some of these bosses. Fixed an issue where vampire brutes using the shadow enchant affix would chain cast Impale. Okay, yeah, that's a good fix. Cellars, okay, the problem with Cellars in the beta was that they felt useless. Just like they did in press preview, they felt useless. Like, why am I hitting 2 loading screens for 10 seconds of content? There's like 1 elite in the Cellar. Like, what am I doing? Let's see what they did. Increased the chance for a dungeon event to occur in Cellars. Okay, that's good. Cellars will now consistently reward a chest upon completion. Okay, now this gives me even, I might consider Cellars a little bit more because I have to hit 2 loading screens. So if I get a chest every time, I might hit the Cellars. Fixed an issue where Cellars would prematurely be marked as complete. I did observe this. I didn't really report this issue, but yeah, I did think that was weird. Fixed an issue where the guaranteed elite monster would be absent from a Cellar. Oh, so so this was actually a bug, because sometimes you would go in a Cellar and there just would be like a pack of monsters and you're like, why did I hit this loading screen? Okay, well, okay. So this still doesn't fix the inherent problem that I have with Cellars. The inherent problem I have with Cellars is that they are balanced in such a way that you either always have to do them and they're very good, or you ignore them entirely and they suck. And what would be really good is if there was a little bit more randomness, where Cellars had like right now Cellars just have this 1 room that can spawn, 1 pack of mobs. But what if sometimes, 20% of the time, they had 2 rooms? And what if sometimes they had 3 rooms, right? And what if sometimes they had 4 rooms, right? They don't always have to be this like static thing that is so constrained. And I feel like that changing it to be something like that would be very Diablo, right? Where you're like, you don't know what you're gonna get. You might get something awesome. You might get something not awesome. So the other thing I feel like maybe another change they could do with Cellars is like maybe not allow you to exit until you like complete the thing. Like you could have like a cursed cellar, or I don't know. There's other things that they can do with cellars, and these are good changes, but I think they need to do more to make them feel like really, really, really good. I don't know, maybe this is good enough for them to ship the game, and you won't have to worry about it too much at end game, because you're just going to be in dungeons all the time doing, you know, whatever end game stuff that there is to do, and you know, maybe you won't even care about cellars at that point. So all right, we're almost done here. General quality of life. Fixed an issue where players could increase attack speed by move canceling attacks early. Very good fix. That was a huge problem with the game. Glad that got fixed. Fixed an issue where characters weren't immune and untargetable after loading into an area. Great fix. Just good fix. The reset dungeon button has been disabled. Okay, if you don't know what this is, a lot of people didn't even know this button existed. So let me explain this. When you finish a dungeon, or even before you finish a dungeon, if you go into sort of like the actions menu, you hit tab, like whatever on the map, there's a reset dungeons button. And it would if you were in a dungeon, it would instantly teleport you out. It would reset the dungeon to being complete. And then you could just do the dungeon again and again and again and again and again. So now I don't think you can do that. I think basically when you finish a dungeon, once you exit the dungeon will be done for a certain period of time before it resets. So I'm not sure, we'll have to test it again, obviously, but I'm not sure you can actually just chain run the same dungeon over and over and over again. You might have to swap between like 2 or 3. You might have to run around to different ones. We'll have to see what this button change actually does, because I used this button all the time and really just didn't test not using this button, right? All right, last one. Fixed an issue that caused Gale Valley and Serric Rapture, these are dungeon names, to have less monsters than intended until the campaign quests in those territories were completed. Don't even think these are in Fractured Peaks, so I think we didn't even play these dungeons. So they're fixing stuff that, you know, we haven't even really played yet in the beta. So that's good news that they're fixing stuff outside of the beta. And, you know, we did have this problem in Diablo 3, right? Where like all of the stuff up to sort of like the Skeleton King was really well finished. It had a fine polish on it. And even all of Act 1 was like pretty well polished. But then you get to Act 2 and oh my God, the bugs, the invisible bees, the completely invincible Lacuni that would one-shot you on landing, that all sorts of really nasty problems sort of popped up. So hopefully we're not going to have that same problem with Diablo 4. And you know, this little line item here under general quality of life leads me to believe that maybe that might be the case, and that they're not just making Fractured Peaks zone really good and then everything else is just kind of meh. Like they're actually spending a lot of time on the rest of the game as well. All right, that's it for this one, everyone. Thanks for reading this blog post with me. If you like this content, then head down below the video and hit that subscribe and like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.